To the ancient Egyptians, death was not the end, but the beginning of a long and dangerous journey. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the air. It is the hour before dawn, and the desert is cold. Not the cold of winter in a place you know, but something older than that, a dry, mineral coldness that settles into the bones like dust, like the memory of stone. The sky above the Nile is still dark, but not entirely. Along the eastern horizon, there is the faintest suggestion of color, not yet light, only the absence of complete darkness, a bruised indigo slowly softening at its edges, the way a wound heals from the outside in. The stars are still present. They have been present all night, watching the river, watching the sand, watching the long flat line of the desert plateau where the cliffs begin and the world of the living ends. You are standing on the west bank of the Nile. The river is behind you. You can hear it, distantly, a low and patient sound, the sound of water moving with great purpose and no hurry at all, carrying silt and memory southward from places you will never see. The reeds along the bank bend in a wind that barely qualifies as wind, only a slow exhalation of cooler air from the water's surface. Somewhere, a bird stirs but does not call. The palms stand very still. Everything here stands very still, because this is the side of the dead, and the dead ask for stillness the way the living ask for breath. Before you, cut into the pale limestone cliffs, is a doorway. It is smaller than you might expect. The entrance to the tomb is modest, a rectangular opening, perhaps the height of a man, perhaps less, framed by stone that has been smoothed and sealed and carved with figures you cannot quite read in this light. Above the doorway, a painted eye watches the horizon. It has been watching this horizon for 3,000 years. It is watching it still. The air that breathes out from the opening is different from the desert air behind you. It is darker air, if air can be said to have color. It is the air of a sealed room, of lamp smoke and cedar oil and linen that has not moved since the moment it was laid down. It is the air of intention, of a space prepared with extraordinary care, furnished with everything a soul might need, and then closed, and sealed, and given back to the dark. This is where we begin tonight. Not inside, not yet, but here, at the threshold. This cool stone doorway between two kinds of existence. Because to understand the ancient Egyptians, to truly understand the world they built and the lives they lived, you must first understand this: they did not turn away from death. They did not pretend it was not coming. They looked at it with clear, steady eyes, and then they spent the entirety of their civilization preparing for it, painting it, writing about it, building monuments to outlast it. No other culture in the ancient world devoted so much of its living energy to the art of dying well. And in that, there is something that speaks to us still. We are drawn to ancient Egypt the way we are drawn to firelight, instinctively, wordlessly, without fully understanding why. Perhaps it is the scale of what they left behind, the pyramids rising from the plateau at Giza, the temples of Luxor still standing in the late afternoon sun, the face of Tutankhamun behind the gold of his mask. Perhaps it is the beauty of their art, those long, elegant figures in profile, those careful painted hands, those eyes outlined in kohl that seem, even now, to be looking at something just beyond the edge of the frame. Or perhaps it is something more personal than that. Perhaps we recognize in the Egyptians something of our own quiet preoccupation, the knowledge, always present, always gently pushed aside, that our time here is brief, and that what we do with it might matter more than we are comfortable admitting. The ancient Egyptians were not comfortable either. That is one of the first truths we must carry with us tonight. They were afraid. Not of death, precisely. Death was not the enemy. Death was simply a doorway, much like the one that stands before you now. What they feared was what lay beyond it. The trials, the dangers, the possibility of a soul becoming lost in the corridors of the underworld. The possibility of a heart found too heavy, of a name forgotten, of a self dissolving into nothingness in the vast dark spaces between the stars. The ancient Egyptian nightmare was not dying. The ancient Egyptian nightmare was ceasing to exist. And against that terror, they built everything. The pyramids were not monuments to pride. They were arguments against oblivion. But we are moving too quickly. We are standing at a doorway, remember, in the hour before dawn, and the sky is just beginning to change. Let us stay here for a moment longer. The plateau on which you stand is called, in Arabic, Al-Qurn, the Horn. The locals have named the sharp peak above the Valley of the Kings after a great serpent they believe lives within it, guarding the pharaohs below. But the ancient Egyptians had a different name for this place. They called it Ta Sekhet Ma'at, the Great Field. And to live near it, as the workmen of Deir el-Medina did, as the priests of the mortuary temples did, was to live in permanent proximity to the sacred. Death was not something that happened elsewhere, in hospitals and quiet rooms behind closed doors. It was here. It was in the limestone dust on your sandals. It was in the smell of the natron being carried down to the embalming workshops by the river. It was in the chanting you heard from the temple precincts at night, the voices of priests reading from scrolls older than anyone could remember, feeding the dead with words the way you feed the living with bread. This was the rhythm of the world. The Nile flooded, the grain grew, the flood receded, the grain was cut. The sun rose from the east and descended in the west. The living worked in the light, and the dead waited in the dark, and between the two there was a relationship, careful, reciprocal, constantly tended, that the Egyptians considered as natural and necessary as breathing. Tonight, we are going to walk through that world together. Slowly. Without hurry. There is no hurry here. We will visit the priests in their linen robes, moving through temple corridors before sunrise, their heads shaved, their feet bare on the cold stone floors. We will enter the embalming workshops by the river and understand, without flinching, without sensationalism, the extraordinary care with which the dead were prepared for their journey. We will sit with the artisans of Deir el-Medina in their small, whitewashed houses at the edge of the desert, and read their letters, and learn their names. We will open the book of the dead and follow one soul through the 12 gates of the night. And at the very end, we will arrive somewhere quiet, somewhere green, somewhere the Egyptians imagined as a place of rest so perfect it resembled the most beautiful morning they had ever known. But that is later. That is the end of the road. For now, the sky is beginning to pale. The indigo is lifting, slowly, from the horizon, and the cliffs above you are taking on color, first gray, then ochre, then the faintest warm gold. The Nile catches the first light and holds it, shimmering. A single ibis crosses the water in silence, its wings barely moving, its long beak pointed at some point beyond the line of palms. The doorway in the rock stands open behind you. The air from inside it is still and cool and very old. Somewhere deep in the stone, in the painted dark, a soul is waiting. And we have all the time in the world. There is a word in the ancient Egyptian language that has no perfect translation in any modern tongue. The word is Kemet. It means, most simply, the Black Land. And it referred not to the sky, not to the night, not to anything we might instinctively associate with darkness, but to the soil. The rich, dark, extraordinarily fertile soil left behind each year when the Nile flood receded, deposited in a thin and precious ribbon along both banks of the river, stretching from the marshes of the delta in the north all the way to the granite cataracts of the south. This black land was life. It was grain and onion and flax and papyrus. It was the difference between a civilization and a desert. And surrounding it on all sides, beginning precisely where the black soil ended and the pale sand began, was the other land. Dishret. The Red Land. The Dead Land. The place where nothing grew and nothing moved except the wind and the occasional shadow of a hawk circling high above the bleached rock. The ancient Egyptians lived their entire lives inside that narrow ribbon of black soil, aware on both sides of them of the desert waiting. To understand them, you must understand that geography first. Because Egypt was not simply a place where a civilization happened to develop. Egypt was a landscape so specific, so singular, so unlike anywhere else in the ancient world, that it shaped the minds of the people who lived there in ways that reached all the way down into how they understood the soul, the stars, and the nature of existence itself. The Nile did not merely water their crops. The Nile was the spine of their cosmology. The Nile was the axis around which the entire world turned. And the Nile ran north. This seems a simple fact until you sit with it. The Nile is one of the very few major rivers in the world that flows from south to north, from the high interior of Africa toward the Mediterranean Sea. This meant that for the ancient Egyptians, the concepts of north and south were inseparable from the concepts of downstream and upstream, of going with the current and going against it. To travel north was to travel with the water. To travel south was to travel against it, aided by the wind that swept reliably up from the north, filling the sails of their reed boats. And so they moved across their world with an ease that seemed almost like a gift, the river and the wind working in complementary directions, as if the landscape itself had been arranged for their convenience. As if something had wanted them to be here. But it is the east and west that concern us most tonight. Stand again on the bank of the river, in your mind, in the hour of early morning. The light is coming now, slowly, with great ceremony, the way Egyptian light always comes, as if it is aware of its own significance. The sun is rising from behind the eastern cliffs, or from behind the low flat eastern horizon if you are in the delta, and as it rises, it transforms the river. The water, which was black in the night and then silver in the first gray light, becomes gold. Then copper. Then a blinding, reflective white that makes you raise your hand to shield your eyes. The east bank catches the light first, and for a few minutes the west bank remains in shadow, darker, cooler, not yet touched. This moment, this daily division of light and shadow across the water, was one of the foundational experiences of Egyptian life. It happened every single day. It happened so reliably, so precisely, so inevitably, that the Egyptians did not merely observe it, they built their entire theology around it. The sun rose in the east. Therefore the east was the place of birth, of renewal, of the living world. The sun set in the west. Therefore the west was the place where things ended, where the light withdrew, where the day concluded its long arc and descended into the realm beneath the earth. The east bank was for the cities of the living. The temples, the markets, the granaries, the houses of mud brick with their small high windows and their courtyards full of geese and children and the smell of bread baking in the early morning. The west bank was for the dead. It was that clean. It was that absolute. The great necropolises, the burial grounds, the tombs, the mortuary temples, were almost without exception built on the west bank, or oriented toward the west, or carved into the western cliffs. Thebes, which the Egyptians called Wazit and which we know today as Luxor, was perhaps the greatest expression of this division. On the east bank, the living city, with its temples to Ammonius at Karnak and Luxor, its markets and docks and the great administrative buildings of the empire. And across the water, directly across, the west bank, a landscape that was effectively one vast city of the dead, stretching from the river's edge back into the cliffs, layer upon layer of tombs cut into the rock, mortuary temples lining the desert plain, and above it all, that sharp limestone peak watching over everything like a presence that had been assigned a task and intended to see it through. The Egyptians who lived on the east bank could see the west bank every single day. They could see it from their rooftops in the evening when the light was long and the cliffs turned amber. They could see it from their boats when they crossed the river to tend the mortuary cults of their ancestors, to bring food and flowers and prayers to the chapels of the dead. There was no separation in their minds between the world of the living and the world of the dead, because there was no separation in their landscape. The two existed side by side, divided by nothing more than a river that anyone could cross in a reed boat in less than the time it takes to eat a meal. The dead were neighbors. The dead were family. The dead were, in a very real sense, still present, still requiring attention, still capable of offering protection or causing harm, still participants in the ongoing life of the community. This is one of the things that made the Egyptians so different from us. We have separated ourselves from our dead very thoroughly. We have placed them in designated zones at the edges of our cities, behind walls and iron fences, visited on specific days, mourned on specific schedules, and then gradually, gently, forgotten. The Egyptians could not do this, and would not have wanted to. To forget the dead was a kind of violence. To allow a name to be erased was a kind of murder. The dead needed the living, and the living needed the dead, and the Nile between them was not a barrier but a bridge. Consider the flood. Each year, with a reliability that felt like divine clockwork, the Nile rose. It began in the south, fed by the summer rains of equatorial Africa and the snowmelt of the Ethiopian highlands, and it moved north through Egypt as a slow, inexorable rising tide, spreading far beyond its usual banks, covering the black soil fields, inundating the lower-lying ground, turning the narrow ribbon of cultivation into something closer to an inland sea. The Egyptians called this season Ake, the inundation, and it lasted roughly from June to September. During this time, farm work was impossible. The farmers were free, and the pharaohs, understanding this with the practical genius that characterized so much of Egyptian administration, put them to work instead on the great building projects, the pyramids, the temples, the tomb complexes that would come to define their civilization in the eyes of all future history. The flood was, on its face, destructive. It swallowed fields and occasionally houses. It drowned animals and disrupted the ordinary routines of life. But it was understood, without question, as an act of profound generosity. Because when the waters receded, slowly, over weeks, pulling back like a long breath, they left behind the black silt, the kemet, the fertile dark soil that made everything possible. Death, the Egyptians understood, was not the end. It was the flood. It was the inundation, disruptive, overwhelming, total, that preceded a new growing season. The body returned to the earth the way the floodwaters returned to the river. And from that return, if the proper preparations had been made, if the proper prayers had been spoken, something new could grow. The Nile taught them this every single year. It is worth pausing here, in this slow chapter of our evening, to simply feel the weight of that understanding. These were people who watched their entire world drown and be reborn on an annual cycle, so reliably that they could predict it with astronomical instruments and calendar markings on stone. They had empirical, observable, repeated proof that what appeared to be an ending was in fact a transformation. And they built their theology on that proof. Not on faith alone, on evidence. The evidence of the river. The evidence of the seed. The evidence of the sun, which descended each evening into the western darkness and was reborn, golden and enormous, each morning in the east. No wonder they were not afraid of death the way we are afraid of death. No wonder they walked toward it with such deliberate preparation. The god most associated with the Nile flood was Osiris, the god of the dead, the lord of the underworld, the green-skinned figure depicted on 1,000 tomb walls, wrapped in the white linen of the mummy, holding the crook and the flail. But Osiris was also a god of vegetation, of grain, of the fertile earth. His mythology was a mythology of death and return. He was murdered by his brother Set, his body scattered across the land, and then gathered and restored by his wife Isis, who loved him with a devotion that ancient audiences found as moving as we find it now. He was killed, and he came back. Not quite in the same form, he became the king of the dead, the judge of souls, the lord of the underworld rather than the living world. But he returned. He persisted. His name was not erased. And that was what mattered. Persistence. Continuation. The refusal of the name to dissolve. The Nile moves south to north tonight, as it has always moved, carrying its dark water through a landscape of sand and stone and starlight. On the east bank, the city sleeps, or the ruins of the city lie still, which is perhaps the same thing. On the west bank, the cliffs are pale in the moonlight, and somewhere within them, deep in the painted dark, the walls of the tombs are still covered in their careful script. The figures still process in their long, elegant lines. The offerings are still piled high before the seated dead. The prayers are still legible, if you know how to read them. And across the river, a lamp goes on in a house on the east bank. A woman rises before dawn to begin the bread. The dough is already mixed, sitting in a clay bowl covered with linen, and when she uncovers it, she sees that it has risen in the night, swelling against the cloth, alive with the same quiet urgency that has been rising in bread dough in this valley for 5,000 years. She works in the lamplight. The river moves outside. The cliffs on the west bank hold their dead. The world is exactly what it has always been, divided and whole. There is a particular quality to silence inside a tomb. It is not the silence of an empty room, which still carries within it the memory of footsteps and voices and the particular acoustics of a space that has known human presence. It is not the silence of a forest at night, which is never truly silent at all, always threaded through with the movement of small things, the settling of wood, the distant breath of wind in the canopy. The silence inside a sealed tomb is something else entirely. It is the silence of absolute completion, of a space that was filled with tremendous care and deliberate love, and then closed and given over. Everything that needed to be said was said. Everything that needed to be placed was placed. The lamps were extinguished. The last footstep crossed the threshold. The door was sealed with plaster, and the plaster was stamped with the mark of the necropolis, the jackal lying over 9 bound captives, the sign of Anubis, the guardian, and then the workman walked away, and the silence settled in like water filling a vessel, complete and permanent and absolute. That silence has lasted, in some tombs, for 3,000 years. We find ourselves here tonight not to be frightened, but to understand. Because inside that silence, inside those sealed chambers with their painted walls and their carefully arranged furniture and their stacked provisions of bread and beer and linen, there was an emotional truth that the Egyptians carried with them every day of their waking lives, a truth so fundamental to who they were that it shaped their art, their architecture, their medicine, their mathematics, and even the way they spoke to one another in the marketplace at noon. And that truth was this: the thing they feared most was not death. It was not pain, or illness, or the loss of those they loved, though they feared those things too, as all people do. What the ancient Egyptians feared, in the deep, wordless, cold sweat in the dark way that fear lives in the body rather than the mind, was erasure. The annihilation of the self. The second death. The death that came not to the body, but to the soul, when the soul, for want of proper preparation or proper prayer or the terrible misfortune of being forgotten by the living, dissolved into the formless dark of the underworld and ceased, simply and completely, to exist. To understand why this terrified them so profoundly, you must first understand what they believed the self to be. We tend to think of the soul as a single thing. A essence, a spirit, a continuity of consciousness that persists beyond the body's ending. The Egyptians did not think this way. For them, the human being was not one thing but many, a complex arrangement of distinct and separate components, each with its own nature and its own needs and its own vulnerabilities, each of which had to survive intact if the person was to persist beyond death. To lose any one of them was to be diminished. To lose all of them was to cease entirely. And the work of the priests and the embalmers and the tomb builders was, At its most fundamental level, the work of keeping all these components together, of preventing the dissolution that the universe, left to its own devices, would inevitably bring about. The first of these components was the ka. The ka is perhaps the easiest for us to grasp, because it resembles most closely what we might call the life force, the animating energy that distinguishes a living body from a dead one. The ka was not quite a personality and not quite a soul in our sense. It was something more like the essential vitality of a person, the invisible double that was born alongside the physical body and remained connected to it throughout life. When a person died, the ka did not die with the body. It survived. But it needed sustenance. It needed, quite literally, to eat and drink, which is why the tomb was stocked with food, why the mortuary cult involved regular offerings of bread and beer and roasted meat placed before the false door of the tomb, that carved threshold through which the ka could pass to receive what it was given. The false door. A door to nowhere that was, in fact, a door to somewhere we cannot see. The Egyptians carved these thresholds with extraordinary care, decorating them with scenes of offering and abundance, because they understood that a ka that was not fed would grow weak. A ka that grew weak could not protect the other components. And without protection, everything else began to unravel. The second component was the ba. The ba is harder to translate, because it was not quite what we would call a personality and not quite what we would call a soul, but something partway between the two, the unique individual essence of a person, the sum of all the qualities that made them specifically themselves rather than anyone else. The ba is depicted in Egyptian art as a human-headed bird, a small, delicate figure with a person's face and the wings and body of a bird, and this image captures something important about its nature. The ba could move. It could travel. After death, the ba was believed to leave the tomb during the day, flying out into the world of the living, moving through sunlight and air and the smell of the river, and then returning to the body at night, the way a bird returns to its nest. This was essential. The ba needed to return. If the ba could not find the body, if the body had been destroyed, or the tomb sealed in a way that prevented the ba's return, or the face on the mummy mask so damaged that the ba could not recognize its home, then the ba would wander. Lost. Homeless. Gradually, over time, weakening and dissolving like salt in warm water. This is why the mummy's face was so carefully preserved. This is why the masks of gold and painted cartonnage were fashioned with such attention to likeness, not as decoration, not as vanity, but as a beacon. A landing place. Come back, the mask said, in a language older than words. Come back. You are known here. You are recognized. This is home. Then there was the Akh, the transfigured spirit, the luminous being that resulted when the Ka and the Ba were successfully united after death, when all the rituals had been performed correctly and the soul had passed its judgment and been found worthy of the afterlife. The Akh was what the deceased became if everything went right. Radiant, powerful, effective, that last word is actually part of the root meaning of the word, Akh, effectiveness, a being capable of influencing the world of the living, of appearing in dreams, of interceding with the gods on behalf of the family that still fed and remembered them. The Akh was the goal. The Akh was the best possible outcome. But there were others. The Shut, the shadow, always present, dark and inseparable, following a person through life and following them after death. The shadow was so fundamental to the Egyptian sense of self that to be without a shadow was to be without existence. And then, perhaps most importantly of all, there was the Ren, the name. The name. In the Egyptian understanding of the self, the name was not merely a label. It was not a convenience for distinguishing one person from another in the marketplace. The name was a living, active, essential part of the person, as real and as necessary as the body or the soul. To know a person's name was to have a kind of power over them. To speak a name was to make that person present, to call them into being in some small but real way. And to destroy a name, to chisel it from a wall, to obliterate it from every inscription, to ensure that no living mouth ever spoke it again, was to commit an act of annihilation. Not symbolic annihilation. Actual annihilation. The person ceased to exist. We have evidence of this belief in the archaeological record, in the most chilling possible way. There were pharaohs in Egyptian history whose names were methodically erased by their successors, chiseled from temple walls, scratched from steel, removed from every record that could be found. Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who dismantled the old religion in favor of his single sun god, had his name destroyed so thoroughly after his death that for centuries his very existence was unknown to Egyptologists. He became the Nameless One. He became, in the Egyptian understanding, someone who had never been. Not dead, but unmade. And the terror of that, the terror of unmaking, was one of the deepest currents running beneath the entire surface of Egyptian civilization. Against this terror, they inscribed their names everywhere. On every wall, on every object placed in the tomb, on the amulets wrapped between the layers of linen, on the tiny blue Ushabti figurines standing ready to serve in the afterlife. They wrote their names in hieroglyphs enclosed in the oval cartouche, that protective loop of rope that held the name inside it like a shield. They hired scribes to copy their names into the mortuary texts. They paid priests to speak their names at the daily offering. They built monuments specifically because stone endures, and stone speaks longer than flesh or papyrus. Every pyramid was, among other things, a name written in a material that was trying very hard to be permanent. And at the center of it all, waiting with the patience of something that has never been in a hurry because it exists outside of time, was the creature the Egyptians called Ammit, the devourer. Part lion, part hippopotamus, part crocodile, the three most dangerous animals in the Egyptian world assembled into a single being of pure consequence. Ammit waited beside the scales of judgment in the Hall of Two Truths, and her purpose was specific and terrible. She waited for the hearts that were found too heavy. For the souls that had not lived well enough, had not spoken truly enough, had not loved carefully enough. When the heart was found wanting, Ammit consumed it. And that consumption was final. No appeal, no second chance, no existence beyond that moment. The soul that Ammit consumed did not go to a place of punishment. It did not suffer in some Egyptian version of damnation. It simply stopped. It became nothing. That was the nightmare. Not fire. Not darkness. Not pain. Nothing. The absolute erasure of everything that you had ever been. And so they prepared. Quietly, methodically, over the entire course of a lifetime, they prepared. They commissioned their tombs while they were still young and healthy enough to supervise the work. They collected the spells and prayers that would protect them in the afterlife, copying them carefully onto papyrus or having them painted on the walls of their burial chambers. They treated the people around them with a care that was not merely social courtesy but something closer to spiritual insurance, because the negative confessions they would have to recite before Osiris required them to have lived without cruelty, without theft, without causing unnecessary suffering to others. They built their lives, in other words, with death in mind. Not with despair. Not with paralysis. But with the quiet, steady, daily attention of people who understood that how they lived would determine what they became. There is something in that, if you let yourself feel it. Something that the silence of 3,000 years has not managed to erase. Outside, the desert holds the heat of the day even as the night grows old around it. The stars that the Egyptians called the imperishable ones, the circumpolar stars that never set, that wheel around the northern sky without ever dipping below the horizon, are still turning above the plateau. The Egyptians believed that the pharaohs, after death, ascended to join those stars, to become imperishable themselves, to circle and endure and never set. Somewhere in the rock, a name is carved in stone. It is still waiting to be spoken. Before the sun rises over the east bank, before the first fisherman pushes his reed boat into the Nile, before the bread ovens are lit in the houses along the canal, a man is already awake. He has been awake for some time. Sleep, for him, is a brief and practical thing, a few hours on a narrow cot in a small whitewashed room within the temple precinct, a room that smells of natron and lamp oil and the particular mineral coolness of stone that has never fully warmed, even in the height of summer. He rose in the dark without hesitation, the way a person rises who has performed the same sequence of actions so many times that the body no longer requires the mind's instruction. He knows exactly where the basin of water is. He knows exactly how many steps it takes to reach the doorway. He knows the feel of the linen robe against his skin, freshly washed, still slightly stiff at the seams. He is a priest. And his day, his true day, the day that matters, begins long before the world outside the temple walls has any awareness that morning is coming. The word we translate as priest does not quite capture what he was. In the Egyptian language, the most common term was Hemnetjer, servant of the god. Not intermediary. Not holy man. Not someone elevated above others by spiritual virtue or personal piety. A servant. The title carries within it a specific and humbling clarity. His function was not to interpret the divine will for ordinary people, not to lead congregations in prayer, not to be a spiritual shepherd in any sense we might recognize. His function was to care for the god's physical presence, the statue that lived in the inner sanctuary, the naos, the darkest and most sacred room of the temple, the way a skilled attendant might care for a very important, very demanding, and entirely silent house guest. He washes now, at the basin. The water is cold. This is required. Ritual purity was not a metaphor for the Egyptian priests. It was a practical, physical, daily discipline, as concrete and specific as any craftsman's preparation of his tools. Before approaching the god, the priest had to be clean. Not merely presentable, but ceremonially pure in a series of specific ways that had been codified over centuries and were followed with the precision of someone who understood that the consequences of error were not social embarrassment but cosmic disruption. He has washed his body completely, using water drawn from the sacred lake within the temple precinct, the still rectangular pool that reflects the stars at night and the sky at dawn and nothing of the human world at all, if it can help it. He has shaved. Every priest of the inner sanctuary was clean-shaven, not merely the face but the entire body, every hair removed, because hair was understood to be a potential harbor of impurity, a place where the contamination of the ordinary world might conceal itself. The smoothness of his scalp in the lamplight gives him a quality that is neither young nor old, neither quite of this world nor of the other, which is perhaps precisely the point. His robe is white linen. Always white linen. Never wool, never leather, both animal products, both carrying within them the associations of the living, breathing, impure animal world. Linen came from the flax plant, from the black soil fields, from the labor of the spinners and weavers who produced it in great quantities for the temples. It was washed and whitened until it held no color but its own, no scent but the clean neutral smell of vegetable fiber dried in the sun. When the priests moved through the temple corridors in their white robes, they were meant to look like something that had been prepared, purified, neutralized, made acceptable to the presence they were about to approach. He moves now through the outer halls of the temple. The columns rise around him, their surfaces covered from floor to ceiling in raised relief, the carved and painted figures of gods and pharaohs engaged in the endless ritual transaction that was the theological engine of Egyptian civilization. The pharaoh offers incense, the god grants victory. The pharaoh presents the image of Ma'at, that small, kneeling figure with the feather on her head, the embodiment of truth and cosmic order, and the god acknowledges the offering, extends a hand in blessing, maintains the arrangement of the universe for another day. These scenes are not decoration. They are, in the Egyptian understanding, active. The image of an offering made is an offering made. The word for a thing and the image of a thing and the thing itself occupy the same ontological space in the Egyptian mind, which is a difficult concept for us to fully inhabit but an essential one if we wish to understand why they carved so carefully, why they painted with such meticulous attention to correctness of form, why they were so profoundly disturbed by the defacement of an image. To damage the image was to damage the reality it depicted. The painted offering on the wall was genuinely feeding the dead. The inscribed name was genuinely keeping the person alive. He passes through the hypostyle hall, where the columns are so massive that 3 men with linked arms could not encircle one of them, and the ceiling above is lost in shadow. During the day, light enters through the high clerestory windows in slanted golden columns, illuminating the dust that perpetually hangs in the air of any enclosed stone space. But at this hour there is no such light, and the lamps along the processional route throw long shadows between the columns, shadows that move slightly as the flame moves, so that the carved figures on the walls seem to shift, to breathe, to turn their painted faces a fraction of a degree toward the passing priest. He does not notice this, or if he notices it, he is not disturbed. He has been walking this corridor since he was a young man, learning the rituals from an older priest who learned them from an older priest still, the knowledge passing down through generations of shaved heads and white linen like a river that knows its banks. The inner sanctuary is ahead. The air changes as he approaches, cooler, stiller, the smell of incense thicker here, accumulated over years of daily burning until it has become part of the stone itself, until the stone breathes it back even when no new incense is offered. He stops before the sealed doors. They are wooden, painted and gilded, and they are sealed each night with a clay seal bearing the mark of the temple, broken each morning by the first priest of the day. He breaks the seal now. He opens the doors. Inside, in the innermost dark, the god is waiting. The statue is small, smaller than most visitors to the great Egyptian temples imagine, because the scale of everything else is so overwhelming that the mind expects a proportionate divinity. But the god lives in a small gilded shrine, barely taller than a man, and the statue within is compact and still and entirely present in the way that only very old sacred objects achieve, a presence that has nothing to do with size and everything to do with accumulated attention. Thousands of priests have stood where he is standing now. Tens of thousands of mornings have begun exactly this way. The weight of all that repetition presses gently on the shoulders. He lights fresh lamps. He burns incense, a cone of kifi, the sacred compound of honey and wine and raisins and myrrh and a dozen other ingredients whose recipe was so closely guarded that it was inscribed on the temple walls rather than trusted to human memory alone. The smoke rises in a slow gray column in the lamplight, and its smell is the smell of every temple morning that has ever happened in this valley, sweet and resinous and faintly dark, like something very old being gently warmed. He presents food. Bread, beer, roasted meat, vegetables, a full meal, arranged on offering tables with the same care a host might show to a beloved and important guest. He speaks the words of awakening, the ritual phrases that were spoken every morning to rouse the god from the stillness of the night. Words so old that their original meaning had become layered with centuries of theological interpretation, words that had been refined and debated and carefully preserved until they were as close to perfect as human language could approximate. He washes the statue with clean water. He anoints it with oils whose scent fills the small chamber. He dresses it in fresh linen. He applies the kohl to its eyes, the dark line that all Egyptians wore, that had practical origins in protecting the eyes from the glare of the desert sun but had acquired over time such deep symbolic resonance that it was inseparable from the image of divinity itself. When he is finished, the god is ready for the day. Clean, fed, clothed, attended. The cosmic machinery has been serviced. The sun can rise. And it does. Outside the temple walls, beyond the sacred precinct with its high enclosure wall of mud brick, the sky is now unmistakably lightening. The east bank is waking. The river is gold. The bread ovens are lit, and the smell of baking drifts across the water with the morning mist, that domestic, irreplaceable smell that means safety and sustenance and ordinary life continuing. Children are beginning to stir. Dogs are beginning to bark at nothing in particular. The city is assembling itself out of its own silence, piece by piece, voice by voice, smell by smell. The priest closes the sanctuary doors. He reseals them with fresh clay, pressing the temple stamp into the soft material with the care of someone who understands that the seal is not merely administrative but protective, a boundary held, a threshold maintained, the sacred space preserved against the encroachment of everything outside it. He walks back through the hypostyle hall. The light is different now, even slightly. The absolute black of before has softened into something merely dark, and the painted figures on the columns are more visible, more settled, their colors richer in the first gray hint of morning. He passes the sacred lake. Its surface is still, perfectly still, holding the last of the night sky in its reflection before the dawn dissolves it. He has perhaps 2 hours before he is needed again. He will spend them in the library, the house of life, the Parank, that extraordinary institution attached to every major Egyptian temple, the scriptorium and school and archive and medical library and magical repository all in one, where the sacred texts were copied and studied and debated by men who considered the care of words as important as the care of the god's physical body. Because words, too, were a form of the divine. Words, too, required tending. The spells in the Book of the Dead were not effective if they were carelessly copied, if a hieroglyph was inverted or a phrase omitted. The dead needed correct language the way the living needed correct food. The wrong thing, however well-intentioned, would not nourish. He settles at a low wooden table. A lamp burns beside him. He unrolls a length of papyrus and examines the text he was copying yesterday, a section from the Book of Coming Forth by Day, the collection we call the Book of the Dead, a passage describing the soul's navigation through the fourth gate of the underworld. He picks up his reed brush. He dips it in the black ink, made of carbon and gum, the same ink that has been used in this valley since the time of the first pharaohs. He finds his place. Outside, the sun has fully risen now. The West Bank cliffs are gold. The dead are quiet in their painted rooms, and the priest's brush moves across the papyrus in the lamplight, and the words he copies are older than the building he sits in, older than the city around it, older than almost anything still walking under this particular sun. He writes carefully. Every word is an act of protection. Every word is a small, deliberate argument against the dark. There is a particular hour in the late afternoon when the light along the west bank of the Nile becomes something extraordinary. It arrives without announcement, the way all the most significant things arrive, gradually, and then all at once. The sun, which has been a white and punishing presence overhead since late morning, begins its descent toward the desert plateau, and as it descends it changes color, moving through a range of golds that have no adequate names in any language. The limestone cliffs catch this light and hold it, glowing with a warmth so deep and so specific that the stone seems, for those few minutes, to be generating the light from within rather than merely receiving it from without. The shadows lengthen across the sand. The river turns the color of beaten copper. And along the edge of the cultivation, where the black soil gives way to pale desert, the low mud brick buildings of the embalming workshops settle into the amber afternoon-like objects that have been exactly where they are for so long that the landscape has grown around them, accommodating them, incorporating them into its own geometry. The workshops are called, in the ancient texts, the Wabit, the pure place. Or sometimes the Pernefer, the house of beauty, the house of perfection. Both names tell you something essential about the Egyptian understanding of what happened inside them. This was not a place of death in any final or desolate sense. This was a place of transformation. Of the most skilled and sacred craftwork the civilization had to offer. of a process so carefully developed over centuries of accumulated knowledge that its practitioners considered themselves not merely technicians but collaborators with the gods themselves, specifically with Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of the dead, who was believed to have performed the first embalming on the body of Osiris himself, and whose presence was invoked at every stage of the work that followed. The chief embalmer wore a jackal mask during the most sacred portions of the ritual. He became, in those moments, not himself but the god. The hands doing the work were human hands, skilled and practiced and careful. But the intention behind the hands was divine. Let us step inside, gently, and understand what happened here. The body arrived at the workshop, carried across the river from the east bank by boat, transported on a wooden bier by the family members who walked behind it in their mourning clothes, their hair loose, their faces unwashed, the women among them with their arms raised in the traditional gesture of lamentation, a gesture so old that it appears in the earliest Egyptian art and never entirely disappears. The family delivered their dead to the workshop and then withdrew. What happened next was the domain of specialists, and it would take 70 days. 70 days. We should pause on that number, because it is not arbitrary. The Egyptians were precise about their numbers, and the 70 days of embalming corresponded to the 70 days during which the star Sirius, the star they called Sopdet, associated with Isis and with the annual flood, was invisible, hidden below the horizon before its Heliacal rising, its annual return to the morning sky that heralded the coming of the inundation. 70 days of absence, and then return. The embalming period was calibrated to the stars, to the flood, to the great cycles of disappearance and renewal that governed everything in the Egyptian world. Even the dead moved to the rhythm of the Nile. The first thing the embalmers did was wash the body. Clean water, perhaps natron solution, natron being the naturally occurring salt compound found in dried lake beds in the Egyptian desert, a substance so central to the embalming process that its very name in the ancient language was netjeri, meaning the divine salt. The body was washed with the care and attention that would be given to a sleeping person, not a dead one. This was deliberate. The language of embalming was always the language of sleep, of rest, of temporary absence rather than permanent ending. The dead were not dead. They were waiting. And what was done to them in the workshop was done in service of their eventual return. Then the internal organs were removed. This is the part of the process that modern sensibilities most resist, and so it is the part that most rewards careful, unhurried attention. Because the removal of the organs was not a brutal or careless procedure. It was performed with exceptional precision by specialists who had learned their craft through years of apprenticeship, who understood the interior geography of the human body with a thoroughness that would not be matched in Western medical knowledge for another 1,000 years. The brain was removed first, carefully, through the nasal passage, using a long hooked instrument of bronze, extracted in small portions and discarded, because the Egyptians did not consider the brain the seat of intelligence or personality. That honor belonged to the heart, which was the center of thought and feeling and moral life, and which alone among all the organs was left in the body, because it would be needed at the judgment. The other organs, the lungs, the liver, the stomach, the intestines, were removed through a careful incision made in the left side of the abdomen, cleaned and treated and wrapped individually in linen, and then placed in the canopic jars. For jars, made of alabaster or limestone or faience, their lids carved in the forms of the four sons of Horus, the human-headed Imsidy, guardian of the liver, the baboon-headed Hapi, guardian of the lungs, the jackal-headed Duamutef, guardian of the stomach, the falcon-headed Kabasanuf, guardian of the intestines. Each jar was a small home. Each organ, carefully housed, would be available to its owner in the afterlife. Because the afterlife was a bodily existence, you needed your lungs to breathe the cool air of the field of reeds, your stomach to digest the grain that grew there in extraordinary abundance. The body cavity was rinsed with palm wine, which acted as a primitive antiseptic, its alcohol content doing the quiet work of preservation that the embalmers understood empirically even without the vocabulary of microbiology to explain it. Then the cavity was packed with temporary stuffing, linen, sawdust, natron, fragrant resins, to maintain the shape of the body during the long weeks of desiccation ahead. And then the natron. The body was covered in natron. Packed around it, heaped over it, sometimes immersed in a natron solution. And then it was left for 40 days. In the hot, dry air of the workshop, the natron drew the moisture from the tissues with the patient efficiency of the desert itself, the same process by which the sun desiccates a fish left on the bank of the river, extended and refined and controlled by human knowledge into something that could preserve a face well enough that we can look at it 4,000 years later and see a person rather than a relic. 40 days. And then the natron was removed, and the real work began. The body that emerged from the natron was dark and desiccated and dramatically reduced in weight, the skin drawn tight over the bones, the features preserved but altered, compressed into something that was unmistakably human and unmistakably changed. The temporary stuffing was removed from the cavity and replaced with permanent packing, clean linen, bags of natron, fragrant sawdust, and the cavity was anointed with oils and resins whose smells were intended to please the gods as well as to preserve the flesh. The incision in the abdomen was closed with a plate of gold or wax or resin, sometimes decorated with the Wajet eye, the eye of Horus, protective and watchful. Then the anointing began. And this is where the workshop became something closer to a place of devotion than a place of craft. The oils used in the anointing of the mummy were expensive, carefully sourced, and imbued with specific theological significance. Cedar oil, imported from Lebanon, with its sharp and resinous smell that could penetrate wood and stone and the centuries themselves, we can smell it still, in some tomb contexts, the faintest ghost of its presence. Juniper oil. Beeswax. The fat of specific animals. Liquid resins that darkened the skin to a deep mahogany and hardened over time into a shell of extraordinary resilience. Each substance was applied with deliberate intention, with spoken prayers, with the invocation of specific protective deities whose powers were called upon to inhabit the oils as they were worked into the body by careful hands. The face received particular attention. The embalmers were extraordinarily skilled at restoring the appearance of the features, packing linen beneath the skin to maintain the fullness of the cheeks, carefully shaping the nose and the eyelids, sometimes inserting artificial eyes of stone or painted linen to give the face an expression of calm and presence rather than the sunken vacancy of desiccation. This was not vanity. This was necessity. The Ba needed to recognize its home. The face was the door the soul came back through, and it had to be unmistakable. The wrapping took the remaining 30 days. Layer upon layer of linen, sometimes hundreds of meters of it, wound in sequences so specific that the wrapping itself constituted a ritual, each layer accompanied by prayers, each bandage placed with amulets tucked between the layers at precisely designated positions on the body. The heart scarab over the chest, a heavy carved beetle of green stone, inscribed on its base with the 42nd chapter of the Book of the Dead, "O my heart of my mother, do not stand against me as a witness." Because the heart, left in the body, left present for the judgment, might remember things its owner would prefer forgotten. The heart scarab was an insurance, a prayer pressed directly against the organ it addressed. The fingers were wrapped individually. The toes were wrapped individually. The whole became the sum of its careful parts, a wrapped, sealed, anointed, inscribed, protected, named, and prayed over object that the Egyptians called the Sa, the noble body, the perfected form, the physical anchor for everything the soul needed to persist. When the wrapping was complete, the mummy was fitted with its mask. The mask rested over the face and shoulders, painted and gilded, the features idealized but specific, strong jaw, wide eyes, the slight formal smile of Egyptian artistic convention that is not quite a smile and not quite an expression of peace but something partway between the two, something that belongs to a face that knows something we do not. The eyes were outlined in kohl. The wig was painted black and blue. The collar of beads and amulets was laid across the chest in brilliant color against the white linen. And then the mummy was laid in its innermost coffin. The coffin was laid in the next. Each coffin fitted inside the larger one like a nested thought, each layer a new wall between the fragile soul within and the vast, indifferent universe without. The spells painted on the coffin walls continued the protection begun by the amulets within the wrappings, the four sons of Horus at the cardinal points, the Jed pillar of stability, the Tayat knot of Isis, not the sky goddess stretching her wings across the lid to embrace the dead within her protection. 70 days after it had arrived, the body was ready. It was no longer quite the person who had walked into the world and eaten bread and loved their children and argued with their neighbors and grown old in the particular way that people grow old in a hot country, a little leathered, a little weathered, their eyes still bright beneath the lined skin. It was something else now. Something more deliberate. Something that had been prepared with the full attention and knowledge and devotion that the civilization could bring to bear on a single task, poured into this one object, this one preservation of a name and a face and a set of carefully packaged organs. The afternoon light has softened now to something purely gold. The cliffs above the workshop are the color of fire. The natron in its great ceramic storage jar sits quietly in the corner of the room, and the linen on the shelves is white as the robes of priests, and the smell of cedar and resin drifts out through the doorway and across the sand toward the river. A family is waiting on the dock. They have been waiting for 70 days. And what is carried to them now, on its gilded bier, in the late afternoon light of the West Bank, is something they will carry the rest of their own lives, the proof that they did everything right, that they gave everything they could, that they sent their dead into the dark as well prepared and as carefully loved as human hands and human hearts could manage. The Nile moves south to north. The light is almost gone. The jackal on the horizon watches everything, and says nothing, and knows everything there is to know about the long road ahead. Imagine that someone hands you a map. Not a modern map, not the clean, precise, satellite-verified cartography we carry in our pockets without thinking. Those perfect aerial abstractions of a world reduced to lines and colors and distances measured to the meter. This map is something older and stranger and more personal than that. It is drawn on papyrus, in columns of careful black hieroglyphs broken here and there by words written in red, the red ink reserved for names of power, for headings, for the moments when the text wishes to announce that what follows is especially important, especially dangerous, especially necessary to remember. The papyrus is rolled and housed in a small painted wooden case, shaped like a figure of the god Osiris, placed between the legs of the mummy in the innermost coffin, close as a whispered secret. This map was made specifically for you. Your name is written in the spaces left blank by the scribe, carefully, in the same red ink, inserted where the template required a name, your name, the name that is more essentially you than your face or your voice or the particular way you laugh. The map knows who it belongs to. And you are going to need it. Because the journey ahead has no landmarks that the living world would recognize. It has gates, 12 of them, in some traditions, corresponding to the 12 hours of the night through which the sun itself must travel each evening in its great solar boat, navigating the underworld from west to east, from sunset to sunrise, carrying the promise of morning through absolute darkness. It has corridors and halls and lakes of fire and fields of reeds and rooms where the walls are made of knives. It has guardians at every threshold, serpents, crocodiles, beings with the bodies of men and the heads of things that do not exist in the waking world, whose names must be known and spoken correctly in order to pass. The wrong name at the wrong gate means delay. Delay means wandering. Wandering means weakening. And a weakened soul, in the corridors of the Duat, is a soul in profound danger of becoming nothing at all. The map tells you the names. This is the Book of the Dead. Not its Egyptian name, the Egyptians called it Runu Perdem Ro, which translates, with a beauty that the English can barely contain, as the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Not going into darkness. Coming forth into light. Coming forth by day. The title is itself a spell, a declaration of intent, an insistence on the outcome before the journey has even begun. You are not descending into death. You are traveling toward morning. And this book, these 192 chapters of instruction and prayer and magical protection, is how you get there. We should begin by setting aside everything we think we know about ancient Egyptian death magic, because most of what popular culture has given us, the curses, the mummies rising from their bandages, the ancient evil awakened by careless archaeologists, is so far from the actual emotional and theological content of the Book of the Dead that it might as well be a different subject entirely. The Book of the Dead is not sinister. Read in its original context, with its original intentions clearly in mind. It is one of the most achingly human documents the ancient world produced. It is a book written by people who loved their dead and were terrified of losing them, not merely to physical death, which was accepted and prepared for, but to the far worse possibility of spiritual annihilation. It is a book of protection. A book of love pressed into papyrus. A parent sending a child on a long journey, tucking instructions into their bag, writing down every possible piece of advice, every password, every address of every person who might help, trying to account for every danger, trying to ensure that even in their absence, their care would still be present. The earliest versions of these texts appear on the walls of royal burial chambers in the Old Kingdom, the so-called pyramid texts, inscribed in vertical columns of hieroglyphs inside the pyramids of the late 5th and 6th dynasties, beginning around 2400 BCE. These were exclusively royal. The dead pharaoh alone had access to their protection, because the afterlife, in that early period, was largely a royal privilege. The common dead had a more ambiguous fate. But the Egyptians were, among their many other qualities, a pragmatic people, and pragmatism eventually prevailed over exclusivity. By the Middle Kingdom, the most important spells had migrated from pyramid walls to coffin surfaces, the so-called coffin texts, painted inside the wooden coffins of increasingly non-royal dead, spreading the protection downward through the social hierarchy. And by the New Kingdom, the height of Egyptian power and confidence, the texts had migrated again, onto papyrus, portable and personal, available to anyone who could afford to have them copied, which meant not only the wealthy but the reasonably prosperous, the skilled craftsmen, the scribes, the merchants, the soldiers who had served well and been rewarded. The democratization of eternity. Slowly, over 1,000 years, the road to the afterlife had widened until it could accommodate not just a pharaoh but a baker, a weaver, a woman who made perfume in a small workshop near the river, an old man who had spent his life fishing the Nile and wanted nothing more in death than to continue doing the same thing in a place where the reeds were always tall and the water was always clear. But the papyrus cost money. And this created one of the quiet tragedies that runs beneath the surface of the Book of the Dead tradition, the difference between what the dead were given and what they needed, a difference determined not by virtue or by the quality of a life lived but by the simple, brutal arithmetic of wealth. The finest examples of the Book of the Dead are extraordinary objects. The Papyrus of Ani, now in the British Museum, is nearly 24 meters long, written in a clear and elegant hand by a skilled scribe, illustrated with detailed vignettes in full color, the weighing of the heart, the journey through the gates, the field of reeds in its peaceful abundance. Ani was a royal scribe, a man of substantial means, and his Book of the Dead reflects that, comprehensive, beautifully produced, every spell included, every illustration carefully rendered. It is, in a sense, the deluxe version of the Afterlife guidebook, the one where no corner has been cut and no chapter omitted. But not everyone could afford Ani's book. There are examples of books of the dead in which the scribe left blank spaces for the name of the deceased, mass-produced template texts, purchased off the shelf as it were, the name filled in after purchase by a different and sometimes less skilled hand. There are examples where the spells are garbled, where hieroglyphs are reversed or omitted, where the text is clearly the work of someone copying without fully understanding what they were copying. And there are examples where the book is very short, only a few spells, the most important ones, the ones the family could afford, chosen with the agonizing practicality of people who knew their dead needed everything and could only provide so much. What do you include when you can only include some of it? You choose the spell for the weighing of the heart. You choose the negative confessions. You choose, perhaps, the spell that allows the soul to take the form of a bird and fly freely through the underworld, because the image of that, your dead mother, your dead husband, your dead child, moving through the dark as a bird, swift and free rather than lost and stumbling, is a comfort you cannot give up. You choose the password for the first gate, because without it, the journey cannot even begin. And the rest you pray for. You trust to the gods, understanding that you did what you could. You trust to the quality of the love behind the incomplete gift. The do-it itself, the underworld through which the dead must travel, was not a single place but a landscape of extraordinary complexity, mapped differently in different periods of Egyptian history, its geography shifting and expanding over centuries of theological imagination. In its most developed form, it was understood as the space through which the sun traveled each night, and the journey of the dead soul through the do-it was therefore also a journey in the wake of the sun itself, moving through the same 12 hours of darkness that the solar boat navigated each evening, protected by the same divine forces, threatened by the same primordial dangers. The greatest of these dangers was Apep, the serpent of chaos, Apophis in the Greek form of the name, an immense and ancient entity that lurked in the deepest corridors of the do-it and sought, every single night, to swallow the solar boat and end the cycle of the sun forever. Every morning the sun rose. The Egyptians understood this as a victory. A renewed victory. Apep was defeated again, as he was defeated every night, by the spells of the gods traveling in the boat and by the prayers of the priests in the temples above, whose ritual recitations were not ceremonial performances but active participation in the battle that kept the world alive. This is what the priests were doing in their locked sanctuaries before dawn. They were fighting. Quietly, in white linen, with reed brushes and ink, but fighting nonetheless. Through the 12 hours the soul travels. In the first hour, it enters the do-it through the western horizon, moving from the world of the living into the world that lies beneath. The boat of the sun is there, moving ahead, its divine crew vigilant. In the second and third hours, there are corridors and gates and the names that must be spoken, the names of the gate, the name of the guardian, the name of the herald who stands beside the guardian, because the system of access in the underworld was bureaucratic in a way that is somehow entirely consistent with what we know of Egyptian administration in the world above. Everything required the correct documentation. Everything required the correct form of address. The Egyptians had built an empire on careful record-keeping, and they had imagined their afterlife the same way. By the 6th hour, the midnight hour, the deepest point of the night, the furthest from either sunset or sunrise, the boat of the sun passes through the chamber where Osiris sits enthroned in his wrappings, green-skinned, still, crowned with the white crown of Upper Egypt, holding the crook and flail crossed over his wrapped chest. This is the center, the still point around which everything else turns. And it is here, or in a hall adjacent to this, that the dead soul faces its most important moment, the moment toward which everything, all the preparation and prayer and embalming and inscription and careful wrapping of amulets, has been directed. The weighing of the heart. But that is the next chapter, and we are not yet there. We are still in the corridors. Still moving through the painted dark, papyrus in hand, following the map that someone who loved us prepared with everything they had and left in our coffin like a letter we could only read in the dark. The names of the gates come back to us. We memorized them, or the priest memorized them for us, or they are written on our wrappings where we can find them when we need them, hieroglyphs pressed against our skin like a second set of instructions for a body that no longer needs its first set. In the 7th hour, the serpent Apep is bound and repelled by the magic of the solar crew. In the 8th, the dead resting in their sandbanks receive the light of the passing sun and are briefly, beautifully animated, they reach upward toward the boat, their arms extended in that ancient gesture of supplication and longing. In the 9th and 10th, the boat accelerates, the night beginning its long arc back toward morning. In the 11th, the stars are reorganized, the beetle of the rising sun begins to form in the prow of the boat, assembling itself from darkness into possibility. And in the 12th and final hour, the boat passes through the body of a great serpent, not a pep, but a creature of renewal, and emerges from its tail transformed. The sun is born. The scarab pushes the solar disk above the eastern horizon. The sky turns from black to violet to gold. Morning. Coming forth by day. The soul that has navigated all of this, that has spoken the right names at the right gates, that has been found worthy at the scales, that has joined the solar boat in its nightly journey and emerged with it into the dawn, that soul has achieved something the Egyptians considered among the greatest possible accomplishments of existence. It has become an Akh, a radiant, effective, transfigured being, neither the person it was in life nor something entirely unrecognizable, but something better than both, continuous with the life that preceded it, carrying within it everything that had been carefully preserved and prayed over and written into the papyrus, and free now, free in a way the living can barely imagine, to exist in the full light of an eternal morning. The papyrus map, its work done, is no longer needed. But someone made it. Someone sat in a lamplit room in a house in a city on the east bank of the Nile, and unrolled the papyrus, and picked up the reed brush, and wrote your name in red ink in all the spaces where a name was needed. Someone who knew that what they were doing mattered, not symbolically, not metaphorically, but actually, concretely, in the specific way that a key matters to a locked door, or a lantern matters to a dark corridor, or a hand matters to someone who is lost and frightened and very far from home. They wrote carefully. They wrote with love. They rolled the papyrus when it was done, and tucked it close, and whispered something that the stone walls absorbed and held, and have held now for 3,000 years, in the patient way that stone holds everything, lightly, and forever. The lamp gutters in the corridor. The map is in your hands. The next gate is ahead, and you know its name. There is a village in the hills behind the West Bank cliffs that most visitors to Egypt never find. It sits in a narrow valley between two ridges of pale limestone, hidden from the Nile by the bulk of the plateau, accessible only by a path that climbs steeply through the rock before descending again into the shallow depression where the houses stand. From a distance, if you approach along the upper path in the early morning, you see the village as the Egyptians who built it must have seen it returning from work, a compact arrangement of mud brick walls, each house pressed close against its neighbor as if for warmth in the cold desert nights, the whole enclosed by a larger outer wall that runs along the perimeter like a sentence held together by its punctuation. The streets are narrow. The doorways are low. The houses are small, 2 or 3 rooms, a cellar for storage, a rooftop sleeping platform where the family would have retreated in the heat of summer, lying in the open air under a sky so dense with stars that the darkness between them seems almost incidental. The village is called Deir el-Medina. The Setmat, the place of truth, is what its residents called it in their own time. And the people who lived here, for nearly 500 years during the height of the New Kingdom, were the most extraordinary community of workers in the ancient world. They were the men who cut the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, the men who painted them, The men who plastered the walls and carved the reliefs and laid the floors and constructed the sarcophagi and did all the 10,000 specific, skilled, back-breaking things that had to be done to transform a crack in the limestone cliff into a home for a pharaoh's eternity. They knew everything. And what they knew, they wrote down. This is what makes Deir el-Medina so singular in the archaeological record of ancient Egypt, so inexhaustibly fascinating to everyone who discovers it. Most of what we know about daily life in ancient Egypt is inferential. We read it from tomb paintings, from official inscriptions, from administrative records concerned with quantities of grain and lengths of linen rather than with the texture of ordinary human experience. But the workers of Deir el-Medina were, by the standards of their time and station, remarkably literate. They wrote on ostraca, fragments of limestone or pottery sherds, the scrap paper of the ancient world, cheap and abundant and entirely disposable, and they wrote about everything. The price of a sandal. A dispute with a neighbor over a stolen chisel. A love poem addressed to a woman compared to a lotus floating on still water. A list of workers absent from the job, with their reasons noted: sick, brewing beer, caring for a sick wife, stung by a scorpion, embalming his mother. The records of a labor dispute, a strike, actually, the first recorded strike in human history, in which the workers of the royal tomb set down their tools and walked out of the valley because their grain rations had not been delivered for 18 days and their families were hungry. They were real people, in a way that the pharaohs on the temple walls cannot quite manage to be. The pharaohs are too large, too perfect, too wrapped in the formal conventions of royal representation, their faces identical across centuries of artistic tradition. But the workers of Deir el-Medina have names, and troubles, and opinions, and an entirely recognizable humanity that reaches across 3,000 years without any difficulty at all. Let us follow one of them through a single day. His name, or a name close to a name we find in the records, is Ka. There was a real man named Ka who worked in the royal necropolis during the reign of Amenhotep III, a foreman of considerable skill and enough accumulated wealth and status to leave behind a tomb that was discovered largely intact in 1906, its contents so well preserved and so carefully assembled that the archaeologist who opened it reportedly wept. But our Ka is a composite, a figure assembled from the accumulated detail of 1,000 ostraca and administrative records, a man who carries within him the lived experience of a community that spent its entire existence in proximity to eternity and found ways, nevertheless, to live with the ordinariness of ordinary days. He wakes before dawn. The house is cold. The desert nights are cold in a way that surprises people who know Egypt only from its noon reputation, a dry and penetrating cold that comes not from moisture but from the absence of anything to hold the day's warmth once the sun has gone. He has slept on a wooden bed frame strung with woven cord, covered with linen, and beside him his wife has slept, and somewhere in the house the children are still asleep in the inner room, curled together for warmth under a linen blanket. He rises without waking them. The lamp is lit, a small clay dish of oil with a twisted linen wick, producing a flame barely larger than a thumbnail, but enough to see by, enough to navigate the familiar geography of the small house without stumbling. He eats something light before work. Bread. Almost certainly, the bread that his wife baked yesterday in the clay oven at the front of the house, using the grain that was delivered as his pay, flat loaves of emmer wheat, dense and filling and slightly sour from the fermentation that is an inevitable feature of bread made in a hot country before refrigeration existed to interrupt the process. Perhaps a few dried figs, a cup of beer, not the strong and cloudy thing we might imagine, but something closer to liquid bread, nutritious and mildly alcoholic, the standard beverage of the Egyptian working world, because the water of the Nile, while essential and sacred, was also a reliable vector of every intestinal ailment the ancient world had to offer. Then he walks out of the house, into the narrow street, joining the other men who are emerging at the same hour from their own doorways, nodding to each other in the pre-dawn dark, exchanging the minimal greeting of men who have made this walk together so many times that words have become optional. They move through the village gate and begin the ascent, up the steep path through the limestone hills, up toward the ridge that separates their world from the Valley of the Kings on the other side. The path is well worn. Their sandals know it better than their eyes. The stars are still visible above the ridge, cold and bright and impersonal, the same stars the priests on the east bank are using to time their temple rituals, the same stars the pharaoh's astronomers are mapping in their careful papyrus records. At the top of the ridge, for just a moment, Ka can see both worlds at once. Behind him, in the narrow valley below, the village is beginning to show lamplight in its windows. And ahead of him, descending into the great natural amphitheater of the Valley of the Kings, is the work. The tombs. The holes in the world that his hands helped make. He descends. The valley is quiet at this hour, which is perhaps the only hour in which it can be said to be quiet in any meaningful sense. Even in the silence, even in the absolute stillness of the limestone bowl with its pale cliffs and its dry gravel floor, there is a weight here that is not quite silence. A density. The presence of everything that has been placed underground within these walls, the mummies in their nested coffins, the furniture and clothing and food and weapons and Ashabdi figurines and papyrus scrolls and board games and bronze mirrors and alabaster unguent jars, all of it sealed into the rock by the work of hands that included Ka's own hands, and his father's hands before him, and his grandfather's before that. The weight of accumulated preparation. The weight of civilizational belief pressed into limestone. The gang divides into two groups, the crew of the right side and the crew of the left side, each responsible for their half of the tomb being cut, the two teams working in parallel toward the burial chamber at the far end of the corridor, advancing the work the way two hands might work together on a single task. The chief workman calls the roll. The men take their tools, the copper chisels that wear down quickly in the hard limestone and must be resharpened regularly by the specialist smith who is part of the crew, the wooden mallets, the lamps. And then they go in. The tunnels are close. The air inside is thick with limestone dust that has been rising and settling and rising again throughout the months or years of excavation. A fine white powder that coats every surface and every lung with equal indifference. The lamps are oil lamps mounted on stands or set into niches cut into the wall specifically for that purpose, and in the enclosed space of a tomb corridor their smoke adds another layer to the air, an oily, slightly acrid smell that mingles with the mineral cold of the rock and the sweat of a dozen men working in a space barely wide enough for two of them to pass each other without turning sideways. The noise is extraordinary. In the confined limestone corridor, the sound of mallet striking chisel striking rock echoes and re-echoes until it becomes something continuous, rhythmic, almost musical in its repetition. a steady percussion that fills the tunnel from floor to ceiling and from entrance to face. The men work in shifts, because the heat generated by lamps and bodies in an enclosed space builds quickly, and fresh air is a limited commodity when you are working deep in a hillside. Every 2 hours or so, a group emerges blinking into the daylight, sits in the shade of the cliff face eating bread and drinking water from the large ceramic jars delivered each morning by the water carrier, one of the village boys, always a boy on the verge of being old enough to join the crew, carrying water as his contribution to the great collective enterprise of building eternity. The plasterers come after the cutters. Where the cutting crew has opened the rock, the plastering crew follows, coating the rough limestone walls with a thin layer of gypsum plaster, smoothed to a surface as flat and fine as paper, because the artists who come after them require a surface that will hold pigment without absorbing it unevenly, a surface that will preserve the paint for as long as the stone behind it endures, which the Egyptians expected and intended to be a very long time. The artists are the aristocracy of the crew. Not officially, the organizational hierarchy of the village was democratic enough that a skilled cutter might earn more respect than a mediocre painter, but in terms of what they left behind, what endures, what we look at now in the lamplight of the open tombs and find ourselves unable to stop looking at. They worked from grid sketches drawn in red outline on the prepared plaster, corrected in black, the senior artist making adjustments to proportion and composition while the apprentices filled in the areas already approved. They worked lying on their backs on wooden platforms to reach the ceiling. They worked in spaces so small that a single painter might be alone with his lamp for hours, the sound of his brush against the plaster the only sound in a chamber that was being prepared for a king. The pigments they used were mineral, red and yellow ochre, white calcite, black carbon, green from malachite, blue from a manufactured compound of copper and silica called Egyptian blue, the first synthetic pigment in history, developed for precisely this purpose and produced in specialized workshops that supplied the tombs with the color of sky and water and healing and divinity. Mixed with an egg or gum Arabic binder and applied to the damp plaster with brushes of varying thickness made from plant fibers, these pigments bonded with the wall so completely that they have survived in sealed tombs for 3,000 years with their colors essentially intact. The red of the pharaoh's skin still red, the gold of his jewelry still luminous, the blue of the sky goddess still the precise blue of a deep sky just before nightfall. The men who made these things knew they were making them for eternity. They knew, because they lived adjacent to it, because they had cut the chambers and plastered the walls and painted the figures and placed the objects and sealed the doors, that what they put into the rock would be there when they were gone. Their own tombs, smaller, simpler, cut into the hillside above the village with the tools of men who were skilled but working on their own time rather than royal commission, were prepared with equal care, because these men more than anyone understood what careful preparation meant. They had spent their professional lives building other people's eternities. They were not casual about their own. In the evenings, the village had a quality that is difficult to imagine from this distance but that the ostraca occasionally hint at, a warmth, a neighborliness, the compressed intimacy of a small community bound together by shared knowledge and shared purpose. The women who spent their days weaving and brewing and grinding grain and raising children and managing the domestic economy of the village with the same organizational competence their husbands brought to the tomb, these women were not silent. They appear in the records as witnesses to legal transactions, as parties to inheritance disputes, as owners of property, as voices insisting on their rights with a directness that the surviving documents preserve without comment, as if it were entirely unremarkable that a woman should stand before the village council and make a case for herself, which in Deir el-Medina it apparently was. The children played in the narrow street. The geese got into the grain. Someone borrowed a tool and did not return it, and someone else wrote a strongly worded note about this on a piece of limestone, and we have the note still. A woman named Nonakti, late in her life, dictated a legal document disinheriting several of her children for failing to care for her in her old age, while specifically confirming the inheritance of those who had shown her proper devotion. Her words, recorded on papyrus, are the words of a woman who has thought carefully about fairness and has decided that sentiment should not override it. She sounds, across 3,000 years, like someone you might know. The day ends as it began, with the walk over the ridge, the descent into the valley, the lamplight in the windows, the smell of bread and wood smoke, and the particular dry smell of the desert that settles over everything when the sun goes down and the air stills. The children are put to bed. The lamp is trimmed. The beer is finished. And somewhere in the village, in a small house pressed close against its neighbor, a man lies down on his wooden bed and closes his eyes, and above him the ceiling of his house is close and familiar, and outside his window the stars are the stars that have watched this valley since before the first stone was cut from it. He knows what is in the rock behind him. He put it there. He knows what the paintings say. He painted them. He knows, better than almost anyone alive, what the journey ahead looks like. He has spent his life illuminating it, wall by wall, chamber by chamber, corridor by corridor. He has painted the gates and the guardians and the weighing of the heart and the field of reeds and the figure of the deceased making offerings to Osiris with the neat, efficient brushwork of a man who has painted this scene many times and knows exactly where each element goes. And now, in the dark of his small house, in the village in the valley behind the cliffs, he breathes slowly, and the stars turn overhead, and the valley is quiet. He is not afraid. He has seen where the road goes. He knows the gates. He knows the names. He has painted the destination with his own hands, in colors that will last longer than anything else he will ever make, and what he painted there is not terrible. It is green. It is flooded with light. It looks, in the way that paradise always looks when imagined by people who know exactly what they are longing for, very much like home. There is a moment that every Egyptian carried with them. Not in the way we carry anxieties, half-conscious, surfacing in the vulnerable hours before sleep, pushed aside by the demands of the waking day. The Egyptians carried this moment differently. They carried it the way a craftsman carries the knowledge of his finest and most difficult work, the way a farmer carries the memory of a drought survived, the way anyone carries something that has shaped them so completely that it has stopped feeling like a thing they hold and started feeling like a thing they are made of. They carried it in their daily choices, in the words they chose or declined to choose, in the small private decisions that no one would ever see and no court of the living would ever judge. They carried it in the line they wrote into the linen wound around their chest before the tomb was sealed. They carried it in the name of the goddess inscribed on the bottom of every set of scales in every market in every city along the Nile, because every weighing of grain, every measurement of oil, every transaction of commerce in the ordinary living world was a small echo of the one great weighing that waited at the end of everything. The goddess's name was Ma'at. And her name meant truth, and justice, and the right order of things, and the harmony that holds the cosmos together when it is held together, and the force that requires the sun to rise reliably and the Nile to flood on schedule and the stars to maintain their appointed positions in the appointed sky. Ma'at was not merely a moral concept. She was a cosmological one. She was the principle by which the universe remained a universe rather than dissolving back into the primordial chaos, the Nun, the infinite dark water that existed before creation and that pressed, always, against the edges of the ordered world, waiting with infinite patience for order to fail. To live in accordance with Ma'at was not simply to be a good person in the way we use that phrase. It was to participate in the maintenance of reality itself. Every act of honesty, every moment of restraint, every kindness offered when cruelty would have been easier, these were not merely personal virtues. They were structural contributions to the coherence of the world. And now, at the end of the journey through the 12 hours of the Duat, the soul arrives at the place where Ma'at is measured. The Hall of Two Truths. Let us enter it slowly, because this is a place that rewards patience. Let us allow our eyes to adjust. The hall is vast, larger than any hall in the living world, larger than the hypostyle at Karnak, larger than any human architecture could achieve, because it exists in the underworld where the dimensions of the living world do not apply and space is a function of significance rather than stone. The ceiling is high and dark and decorated with stars, the same stars that will above the Egyptian desert every night, here made permanent, made interior, made the canopy of this most important room. The floor is smooth and white, the color of calcite, the color of bone, the color of linen fresh from the washing. The air is still. Not the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness of absolute attention, the stillness of a room in which something very important is about to happen, and everything in it knows it. Along the walls, arranged in 2 long rows, sit the 42 assessors of the dead. They are not gods, precisely, though they have the aspect of the divine, figures in the formal Egyptian style, upright, still, their hands resting on their knees, their faces directed forward with the composed and ancient attention of beings that have been performing this function since the beginning of the world and will continue performing it until its end. Each of them is the assessor of a specific transgression. Each of them has heard every possible human version of the act they oversee, every excuse, every justification, every tearful explanation and careful reclassification of a wrong as something more nuanced than wrong, and none of that has changed their expression by a fraction of a degree. They are patient. They are specific. And they are waiting. At the far end of the hall, on a great throne whose back is carved in the shape of 2 immense wings, sits Osiris. He is green-skinned, as he always is, the color of new growth, of the Nile vegetation after the flood, of the first shoot breaking through the dark soil in the season of growing. He wears the white crown of Upper Egypt, tall and distinctive, and over his wrapped body he holds the crook and flail crossed at his chest, the instruments of kingship and of harvest, of shepherding and of separation, the crook that guides, the flail that threshes. His face is composed and still. He has been sitting in this hall for as long as there have been dead to come before him, and in all that time his expression has not changed, because the judgment he administers does not require emotion, only truth. Behind him stand his sisters, Isis and Nephthys, their arms half raised in the gesture of protective embrace, the white linen of their robes untouched by the darkness around them. Beside the throne, Thoth stands ready, the ibis-headed god of writing and wisdom, the divine scribe, holding his reed brush and his palette, prepared to record what happens here with the precision and the permanence that only the god of writing can guarantee. Nothing in this hall goes unrecorded. Nothing in this hall can be misremembered or misrepresented after the fact. Thoth is the court reporter of eternity, and his record will stand. And at the center of the hall, beneath the assembled gaze of everything divine and everything final, stands the scale. It is not elaborate. It is a simple balance scale, the kind that appears in every market and every administrative office in every city in Egypt, two pans suspended from a central beam, the beam balanced on a central support, the whole calibrated to detect differences of weight so small that a human hand could not feel them. On one pan of the scale, placed there by Anubis, who stands beside it in his jackal form, his dark muzzle pointed downward, his ears alert, his hands on the beam with the gentleness of a craftsman who knows his instrument. On one pan sits a single feather. The feather of Ma'at. White, perfect, weightless in the way that only the absolutely true can be weightless. On the other pan will be placed the heart. The soul that has traveled through the 12 hours of the Duat, that has spoken the names at the gates, that has arrived here after the most significant journey any being can undertake, must now watch as the organ left behind in its body, the heart, the seat of thought and feeling and moral consciousness, the one organ the embalmers did not remove, left in place precisely for this moment, is lifted from the chest and placed on the scale across from that single, perfect feather. And here is the thing about the heart that the Egyptians understood with a clarity that is both beautiful and terrifying. The heart remembers everything. Not the way we speak of memory as something that can fade or distort or be reframed by the comfortable passage of time. The heart, in the Egyptian understanding, was an incorruptible record. It had registered every act, every thought, every moment of cruelty or compassion or cowardice or courage, and it had registered them precisely, without the softening gloss of self-justification that the living mind applies to its own history almost automatically, almost charitably, the way we tend to remember our own behavior more generously than those around us remember it. The heart knew. The heart had always known. And the heart could not lie. This is why the heart scarab was so important. This is why the Book of the Dead includes, as one of its most essential spells, the plea addressed directly to the heart itself, "O my heart of my mother, O my heart of my different forms, do not stand against me as a witness. Do not be opposed to me in the tribunal. Do not be hostile to me in the presence of the keeper of the scales." The Egyptians were aware, with a psychological acuity that we might find startling, that the self could be its own most devastating witness. That what we know about ourselves, what the honest part of us has always known, beneath the comfortable stories we tell ourselves and others, could, at the moment of final reckoning, be more damning than any accusation from outside. Before the scale is used, there is one more ritual. The negative confessions. The soul must speak. It must address each of the 42 assessors in turn, by their specific name, in their specific domain of judgment, and declare its innocence of the transgression each one oversees. 42 declarations. 42 statements of what was not done, each one a precise and narrow claim, each one addressed to a being that has heard every version of these words and knows, as certainly as the heart knows, whether they are true. I have not committed sin. I have not committed robbery with violence. I have not stolen. I have not slain men or women. I have not stolen grain. I have not purloined offerings. I have not stolen the property of a god. I have not uttered lies. I have not wasted food. I have not uttered curses. I have not committed adultery. I have not made any men to weep. I have not eaten my heart in grief. I have not attacked any man. I have not acted guilefully. I have not laid waste the plowed land. I have not been an eavesdropper. I have not slandered a man. I have not been angry without just cause. I have not debauched the wife of any man. I have not polluted myself. I have not terrorized any man. I have not disobeyed the law. I have not been wrathful. I have not shut my ears to the words of truth. I have not stirred up strife. I have not acted with insolence. I have not judged hastily. I have not made myself deaf to words of right and truth. I have not made another person to weep. I have not done harm, and I have done no evil. 42 statements. Each one a window into the full moral complexity of what the Egyptians considered a life well lived, not merely the prohibitions against violence and theft that appear in the legal codes of every civilization, but the subtler ones. I have not made another person to weep. I have not been angry without just cause. I have not shut my ears to the words of truth. I have not judged hastily. These are not the commandments of a society concerned only with maintaining social order. These are the confessions of a people who understood that a life could cause enormous damage without ever raising a hand, through inattention, through cruelty of tongue, through the small daily decisions not to see what was there to be seen or hear what was there to be heard. The hall is very quiet while the soul speaks. And then Anubis, who has stood beside the scale with the patience of something that has never needed to be impatient, reaches toward the chest of the soul and lifts the heart. It is warm. It is exactly the weight of a lifetime. He places it on the pan of the scale, and steps back, and the beam of the scale moves. This is the moment. This is what every pyramid was arguing against. What every inscribed name was insisting upon. What every amulet tucked between layers of linen was protecting. What every prayer spoken by every priest in every mortuary chapel at every dawn was trying to prepare for. The beam of the scale moves, and what it does next is the most important thing that has ever happened. If the heart is lighter than the feather, or equal in weight, perfectly balanced, the beam settling level as the surface of still water, then Thoth lifts his brush and writes the verdict, and Osiris inclines his head, and the doors at the far end of the hall open onto a light so warm and so clear and so free of the accumulated weight of everything that led to this moment that the soul moves toward it the way water moves downhill, inevitably, gratefully, as if it always knew this was where it was going. But at the edge of the scale, crouching in that narrow space between the judgment and its consequence, Amit waits. She is always there. She has always been there. Part lion, part hippopotamus, part crocodile, the composite of three sources of sudden, total, inescapable ending. She waits with the stillness of something that does not need to hurry, because what she is waiting for will either arrive or it will not, and neither outcome requires her to do anything except wait. Her eyes are on the scale. They have always been on the scale. In every tomb painting of this scene, across hundreds of years of Egyptian art, in every version of this image from every period of the civilization, Ammit occupies the same position, wears the same expression, holds the same absolute stillness. She is the consequence of a life not lived in accordance with Ma'at. Not punishment in the sense of suffering inflicted from outside. Not damnation in the sense of an eternity of pain. Ammit is simply the end of the story, the closing of the book, the extinguishing of the lamp, the silence that follows when there is nothing left to say. A heart too heavy for Ma'at's feather is a heart that accumulated too much of what was not true, too much cruelty, too much dishonesty, too much casual damage done to others and left unrepaired. And that accumulation, that weight, has a consequence as simple and as absolute as the consequence of a scale tipping under too much burden. The story stops. We should sit with this for a moment. Not with fear, but with the particular quality of attention this place seems to require, the attention of people who are, after all, also living lives that will one day be weighed, in whatever form the weighing takes for us, in whatever hall our own tradition has imagined or failed to imagine for that purpose. The Egyptians were not unique in believing that how you live determines what you become. But they were perhaps uniquely specific about it. They wrote it down. They painted it on their walls. They placed it in their tombs as a reminder to the living who came to make offerings, as a daily confrontation with the moral stakes of ordinary life. Every time an Egyptian stood before the tomb painting of the weighing of the heart, they were standing before an image of their own future. Every time they made a choice, to tell the truth or deflect it, to help or look away, to speak up or remain silent, they were adding to or subtracting from the weight that the scale would one day measure. The beam settles. The hall is very still. Thoth's brush is poised. Anubis watches the scale with the focused attention of someone who has done this 10,000 times and finds it no less significant for the repetition, because each time is someone's only time, and that fact alone makes it infinite. And outside this hall, outside this moment that is not a moment but a culmination, the desert is dark and vast and entirely unconcerned with what happens here. The stars will overhead in their imperishable circuits. The Nile moves north. The limestone cliffs of the West Bank hold their dead in their painted rooms, each room a small argument for the soul's survival, each name carved in stone a small refusal of the dark. The scale is still moving. It is still deciding. It has not finished yet. There is a bread loaf in a museum in Turin that is 3,500 years old. It sits in a glass case, behind the careful temperature-controlled air that museums maintain for their most fragile charges, and it looks, this is the thing that stops people when they first see it, the thing that makes them lean a little closer to the glass. It looks almost like bread. Not the bread of yesterday, not something you would reach for without thinking. But recognizably, unmistakably, bread. Round, slightly flattened, its surface cracked in the particular way that bread cracks when the crust sets before the interior has finished expanding. It was placed in a tomb. We do not know whose tomb. We do not know the name of the person for whom it was baked. The hand that shaped it is anonymous in the way that most hands in history are anonymous, and the tomb was sealed, and the dry desert air did what dry desert air does when given sufficient time and sufficient stillness, which is to say it preserved. It held the thing in suspension between what it was and what it would have become if the air had been different, if the tomb had not been sealed, if the centuries had been given access to do their usual slow work of dissolution. And so the bread is still there, waiting, in its glass case, in the museum named after a city the baker never knew existed, for a visitor who speaks a language the baker could not have imagined, to lean close to the glass and feel, for a moment that is brief but not insignificant, the particular vertigo that comes when time collapses without warning. This is what the Egyptians left behind. Not only the great things, not only the pyramids and the temples and the golden masks of the pharaohs that fill the imagination and the exhibition catalogs and the documentary films. Those things are extraordinary, and we will not diminish them. But it is the small things, the accidental survivals, the objects that were placed in the dark without any particular expectation that they would one day be seen again by living eyes, it is these that do the deepest work on us now. Because the great things were built to last. The pharaoh's architects calculated the weight of the limestone blocks and the angle of the pyramid's slope with survival in mind, with the explicit intention of outlasting not just their own generation but every generation that might conceivably follow. The great things were arguments against time, made by people with the resources to make such arguments credibly. But the bread loaf was not an argument against time. It was simply bread. It was sustenance for a journey. It was the last thing someone could think to give, pressed into the dark alongside everything else they hoped would help. That is the difference. And in that difference lives something that no pyramid can quite contain. Let us walk slowly through what they left behind. Let us take our time. There is no reason to hurry here, in this late and quiet chapter of our evening, and the objects themselves seem to prefer a slow and careful attention. They have been waiting long enough that another moment of unhurried regard is not an imposition but an acknowledgement. The Ashabdi figures stand in their hundreds of thousands in museum collections around the world. Small figures, rarely more than the length of a hand, made of faience or wood or limestone or bronze, their surfaces inscribed with the 6th chapter of the Book of the Dead, the spell that animated them, that called them to service when their owner was summoned to work in the afterlife. The afterlife, as the Egyptians imagined it, was not entirely a life of rest. There was labor in the field of reeds, the same labor that sustained life on earth, the digging of irrigation channels, the harvesting of grain, the carrying of sand. Divine labor, sacred labor, labor performed in a landscape of incomparable beauty, but labor nonetheless. And the wealthy dead, who had not performed much physical labor in their living years and did not particularly wish to begin in their eternal ones, solved this problem with characteristic Egyptian practicality. They commissioned small figures to do it for them. The Ashabdi would answer when the name was called. The Ashabdi would say, in the words of the spell inscribed on their surface, "Here I am." The deceased could rest. A wealthy tomb might contain 401 Ashabdi figures, one for each day of the Egyptian agricultural year, and 36 overseers to manage them, one for each 10-day week. The logic is impeccable. The preparation is total. And holding one of these figures now, in a museum gallery where the afternoon light falls across the faience in a way that makes the blue-green glaze almost luminous, you feel the weight of that preparation. Someone commissioned this figure. Someone paid the faience worker who mixed the quartz paste and shaped it and fired it in a kiln and wrote the spell in black pigment on its surface while the glaze was still warm. Someone wrapped it carefully and placed it in the tomb and thought, there. That is one more thing arranged. One more danger anticipated. One more gap in the preparations filled. The scarabs lie in their trays, drawer after museum drawer of them, in their hundreds and their thousands. Carved from stone or molded in faience or pressed in clay, blue and green and gold and the deep red of carnelian, in the shape of the dung beetle that the Egyptians called keeper, the one who comes into being, the one who transforms. They had watched the beetle roll its ball of dung across the sand and understood something in that simple, persistent labor that struck them as cosmologically significant. From what was dead and discarded, new life was being rolled forward. The sun itself was pushed across the sky by an immense scarab, the god Khepri, the morning form of the solar deity, eternally rolling the disk of the sun above the eastern horizon. And so the scarab became the symbol of transformation, of becoming, of the self that persists through change and continues on the other side of it. They placed scarabs in the wrappings. They wore scarabs as rings, pressed into wax to seal letters that have long since crumbled into dust. They gave scarabs to each other as gifts, as declarations of affection or loyalty, as talismans for protection during travel or childbirth or illness. Some scarabs carry inscriptions that have nothing to do with death at all, commemorative scarabs issued to mark royal events, marriage scarabs recording the names of pharaoh and queen, scarabs inscribed with proverbs or well wishes or the kind of small personal messages that people have always pressed into the objects they give to those they love. One scarab in the British Museum collection bears an inscription that translates, approximately, as, "May your heart be glad." Nothing more than that. We do not know who gave it, or who received it, or what the occasion was, or whether the heart in question was ever, in fact, glad. But someone thought it, and pressed it into stone, and gave it to someone they cared enough about to press it into stone for. And 3,000 years later, here it is, behind its glass, its small wish still legible, still aimed at a recipient who is long past receiving anything. May your heart be glad. The letters survive in their hundreds, written on ostraca and papyrus, from soldiers and officials and priests and farmers and women and children and old men and people in the middle of their lives who could not have known they were writing to us but wrote anyway, with all the unguarded specificity of people who believed they were writing only to each other. A soldier in Nubia writes to his mother asking her to send him sandals because his have worn through and the ground is sharp. A scribe named Amenhotep writes to a colleague complaining that his delivery of papyrus is late and that this is, he wishes to make clear, entirely unacceptable. A woman writes to her dead husband, this is a practice the Egyptians had, writing letters to the dead, in the belief that the dead could hear and sometimes intervene, asking him to please stop haunting her, because whatever she did to offend him, she did not do it deliberately, and she is tired, and the children are difficult, and she needs the haunting to stop. We do not know if it stopped. We have her letter but not his answer, if he gave one. A man named Noctaman, a farmer from somewhere in Upper Egypt, appears in a legal document from the reign of Ramesses II because his neighbor disputed the ownership of a field. The case was heard by the local council. Documents were presented. Witnesses were called. Noctaman won. The document recording his victory was preserved in the dry archive of the desert, and we have it, and we know his name, Noctiman, the strong one of Ammonius, and we know he had a neighbor he disagreed with and a field he cared enough about to take to law, and that is all. It is enough. The particular human texture of a dispute over land is so recognizable that Noctiman is not quite a stranger. He is simply someone we have not met yet. There is a foreman from Deir el-Medina named Ka, the real Ka, not the composite of our 7th chapter, whose tomb was found almost entirely intact in 1906 by the Italian archaeologist Ernesto Schiaparelli. Inside, Ka and his wife Merit lay in their nested coffins, surrounded by everything they had accumulated and been given and loved well enough to want near them in the afterlife. His work tools were there, the cubit rod he used to measure the dimensions of the royal tombs, still accurate, still calibrated to the royal cubit, the standard he had applied 10,000 times in his working life. His linen was there, folded with the care of someone who owned good linen and knew it. His razor was there. His sandals. Merit's wigs, stored in their round wooden cases. A board game. Cosmetic jars still containing traces of their original contents, kohl for the eyes, oil for the skin, the preparations for daily life carried into eternal life because the Egyptians did not imagine eternity as a departure from everything familiar but as a continuation of it, perfected, permanent, and free from the minor indignities of the mortal body. Schiaparelli, documenting the contents of the tomb, noted the presence of a small linen bag in which Merit had placed what appeared to be a lock of hair. Whether it was her own hair or someone else's, a child's, a mother's, someone loved and lost before her, is not recorded. The bag was tied closed with a careful knot. It had been placed in the tomb with the same deliberateness as everything else, not forgotten, not casual, but chosen. Included. This small linen bag with its small interior secret, carried by a woman named Merit who died in Deir el-Medina 3,000 years ago, was important enough to her that she wanted it near her forever. We do not know what was in the hair, or what it meant. We know that she kept it. The objects accumulate, in the imagination as in the museum cases, and what they accumulate into is not antiquity, not the remote, strange, incomprehensible world that ancient civilizations sometimes seem to be when viewed only through their official monuments and their royal inscriptions. What they accumulate into is something much simpler and much harder to dismiss. Humanity. Continuous, specific, unmistakable humanity. The same hands that built the pyramids also baked the bread. The same minds that developed the Book of the Dead also wrote the letter to the neighbor about the borrowed chisel. The same hearts that feared Ammit and loved Ma'at and performed the daily rituals that kept the cosmos in motion also lay awake at night worrying about the sandals, about the field, about the ghost of the husband who would not stop haunting, about the lock of hair in the linen bag and what it meant to keep it and what it would mean to leave it behind. They did not leave it behind. That is the thing. They took it with them, as far as they could take anything, into the dark of the sealed room, and they trusted the darkness to hold it. And the darkness did. 3,000 years of it, pressing gently and evenly on the folded linen and the wooden cases and the bread loaf in its glass case in Turin, the darkness doing nothing but holding, until a door opened and the light came in and someone, Schiaparelli, or a farmer whose plow turned up a piece of faience, or an archaeologist on their knees in the sand with a soft brush, someone looked at what had been left and understood, in the way you understand something that does not require translation because it has always been in your language, that what was here was not the ancient past. It was a person. Named, specific, irreplaceable. Someone who feared the second death and loved their wife and carried a cubit rod to work every morning and walked over the ridge into the valley where the kings were buried and spent their days illuminating eternity and their evenings at home in the small house in the narrow street where the lamps burned low and the children slept and the desert held the heat of the day a little while longer before releasing it into the cold of the night. Someone whose name we sometimes know and sometimes do not, and for whom the knowing or not knowing changes nothing essential. They were here. They worked here. They loved here, and feared here, and hoped here, with a completeness and an urgency that the centuries have not diminished by a single degree. The bread loaf sits in its glass case. The scarab says, "May your heart be glad." The linen bag with its small secret is somewhere in a storage drawer, carefully catalogued, correctly preserved, waiting with the patience of something that learned patience from the desert itself. And in the painted rooms of the West Bank, in the sealed chambers that have not been opened and may never be, the names on the walls are still there. Still held in their cartouches, those oval loops of rope that were meant to protect a name the way a hand protects a flame from the wind, curled around it, sheltering it, insisting on its continued existence against whatever the dark might bring. The flame is still burning. Quietly, in the stone. 3,000 years of quietly, and still. There is a place the Egyptians dreamed of that was not so different from the world they knew. This is perhaps the most tender thing about it. The paradise they imagined, the destination toward which all of it was aimed, toward which the prayers and the amulets and the painted walls and the carefully wrapped linen and the 70 days of preparation and the 12 hours of the duet and the great weighing in the hall of final truth were all oriented, like flowers oriented toward light, was not a place of clouds and abstraction and formless spiritual radiance. It was not a place outside of time and matter and the specific sensory texture of existence. It was not, in any of the ways we tend to imagine paradise, a departure. It was an arrival. The Egyptians called it Aru, the field of reeds. And when they described it, in the papyrus scrolls and the tomb paintings and the quiet, careful language of the spells that were meant to ease the soul's passage toward it, what they described was Egypt. The Egypt of a perfect morning, before the heat of the day had built, before the 1,000 small difficulties of a life had assembled themselves into their familiar weight. A place of tall reeds growing in rich dark soil, bending in a wind that was always cool and never harsh. A place where the Nile moved with its usual patient purpose through a landscape of such beauty that the beauty itself seemed to have been arranged, as beauty rarely is in the living world, for the specific comfort of whoever happened to be standing in it. A place of grain fields so abundant that the harvest never exhausted them, of water so clear that the fish moving through it were visible from the bank as flashes of silver in the green depths. A place where the sky was the particular blue of the Egyptian sky at the hour when the morning has fully established itself but the noon has not yet arrived, that specific, unhurried, deeply peaceful blue that the tomb painters tried to reproduce with their manufactured Egyptian blue pigment, knowing they were approximating something they could describe but not quite capture. You did not ascend to the field of reeds. You did not transcend into it. You arrived at it the way you might arrive, after a long journey, at a place you had always known existed and had always intended to reach, and finding it exactly as described, better than described, because the description, however carefully composed, could not account for the smell of the water, or the sound of the reeds in the wind, or the way the light came across the grain fields in the early morning, horizontal and gold, making each individual stalk visible in its individual particularity, the way light only does when it is moving at the right angle and you are standing in exactly the right place to receive it. Let us walk there now. Slowly. There is no distance left to cover that requires hurry. The soul that has arrived in the field of reeds after its long journey through the duet, after the gates and the guardians and the 12 hours of the night and the hall with the scale and the feather and the verdict of the heart, this soul is not exhausted in the way a traveler returning from a difficult journey is exhausted. It is lighter than it has ever been. The weight that the scale measured and found acceptable was still weight, still the accumulated gravity of a life of choices and consequences and attachments and losses. And that weight, having been measured and found in right proportion, having been acknowledged and assessed and accepted, has been, not erased, because the Egyptian paradise was not a place of forgetting, but set down, placed gently on the bank of the inner river, where it will remain, present but no longer carried, known but no longer burdened, the whole history of a self at rest in a landscape that can hold it. The reeds grow tall along the water's edge. Their stalks are thick and smooth and slightly cool to the touch in the morning, before the sun has warmed them, and they move together in the wind with a sound that is one of the oldest sounds in the world, the dry, soft percussion of reeds in gentle air, the sound the Nile has made along its banks since before the first city was built on either side of it. The ancient Egyptians heard this sound every day of their lives. It was the background of their mornings, the soundtrack of the irrigation season, the sound of the world going about its essential business with the unhurried competence of something that has been doing what it does since long before there were ears to hear it. In the field of reeds, this sound is continuous. And in the field of reeds, you are not alone. The dead are here, the ones who came before you, the ones whose names were spoken at the daily offering in the mortuary chapel for the decades between their death and yours, the ones whose faces looked out from the painted walls of the tomb with that composed and slightly formal expression that the Egyptian artistic convention required but that, in this place, has softened into something more natural, more recognizable. The grandmother whose wig was stored in its round wooden case and whose hands you held at the end. The father who taught you the trade, who handed you the chisel and showed you how to hold it against the stone before the mallet fell. The child who did not survive the fever, who was wrapped and placed in the small coffin painted yellow and red, and whose name was spoken every day at the offering until the speaking of it became a kind of presence rather than an absence. They are here. Not as they were at the end, not diminished by illness or age or the particular weariness that a long life accumulates around itself like silt. They are as they were at their best, in the fullness of whatever they were when they were most themselves. You recognize them the way you recognize someone in a dream, immediately, completely, without the slight delay that recognition sometimes requires in the waking world when you encounter someone out of context. Here there is no context but the right one. Here everything is in its proper place. The Egyptians imagined that the work continued in the field of reeds, but we should not let the word work carry any of its usual weight. The grain that needed harvesting in the field of reeds was grain that grew in abundance so extravagant that the harvest was more gift than labor. The irrigation channels that needed digging connected water that was already flowing to soil that was already fertile, in a landscape where nothing resisted cultivation, where the earth cooperated with whatever was planted in it with the enthusiastic generosity of a world that had been arranged specifically for the nourishment of the people living in it. The Ashabdi figures stood ready if you called them. But there were mornings in the field of reeds, and it was always morning in the field of reeds, or something very like morning, the light always at that angle, the air always at that temperature, when you simply walked along the water and felt the reeds brush your arm and watched the birds move through the sky above you and did nothing that could be called work at all. Just walking. Just breathing. Just being present in a place that was glad to have you. The Egyptians had a phrase that appears frequently in the funerary texts in connection with the paradise they imagined, a phrase that describes the condition of the blessed dead in the field of reeds. Neferu Neferu, roughly, the beautiful of the beautiful. The good of the good. The phrase doubles back on itself in the way that Egyptian language sometimes does, using repetition for emphasis in a manner that feels less like grammar and more like music, like a phrase played twice to make sure you heard it correctly the first time. The beautiful of the beautiful. As if beauty, in the field of reeds, was not merely present but concentrated. As if it had been distilled from the full range of beautiful things the living world contained, all the mornings, all the river light, all the reed sounds and bird calls and smell of black soil after the flood, and offered back, clarified, in a form the living world could only approximate. The sun moves across the sky of the field of reeds, and it moves differently here. Not faster, not slower, but with a different quality of movement, the way a piece of music that you love moves differently on the day when you are truly listening than on the days when it is only background. You notice it. Each position of the light across the water is distinct and noticed and appreciated in a way that the urgencies of the living day do not always allow. The living day is full of things that redirect attention. The field of reeds is not. There is a God here whose presence in the field of reeds was essential to the Egyptian imagination of paradise, and his name was Osiris. But here, in this place, he is different from the Osiris of the Hall of Two Truths, different from the green-skinned judge on his winged throne, holding the crook and flail, presiding over the weighing with his composed and final authority. Here he is the Lord of the living dead, which sounds contradictory until you understand that for the Egyptians the afterlife was not the opposite of life but its continuation, and Osiris was not the god of ending but the god of the form that existence takes after transformation. He is green here too, always green, the green of new growth, the green of the Nile floodplain in the season of growing, but here the green is warm. Here the crook and flail are symbols not of judgment but of shepherding, of the tending of souls the way a good shepherd tends the animals in his care. Here the white wrappings of the mummy, in which he is always depicted, seem less like the preparation of the dead and more like the formal clothing of a host who has dressed carefully because he considers your arrival an occasion worth dressing for. He is glad you are here. The light is at its most beautiful in the late morning of the field of reeds. By late morning, if there is such a thing as late morning in a place where time does not progress in the way it progresses in the living world, but rather inhabits a perpetual quality that is adjacent to the best possible version of each hour, By late morning, the dew that settles on the reeds in the night has mostly lifted but not entirely, and in the particular slant of light across the water you can see, if you look carefully, the individual droplets still clinging to the reed stalks at the water's edge, each one a small perfect sphere that contains within it a tiny reflection of the entire landscape, the sky, the reeds, the water, the fields of grain in the middle distance, the birds crossing the sky above. The whole world, held in a drop of water. The whole world, small enough to balance on the end of a reed stalk, present in its entirety in the smallest possible frame. The Egyptians understood something about wholeness that we sometimes lose in the scale of our own ambitions, that the complete and the large are not the same thing. That a life could be whole without being grand. That a day could contain everything necessary without containing everything possible. The bread loaf in its glass case in Turin was whole. The scarab with its small wish, "May your heart be glad," was whole. The linen bag with its secret was whole. The field of reeds was not paradise because it was vast or spectacular or beyond anything the imagination could conceive. It was paradise because it was exactly enough. Because it was the Nile and the reeds and the cool morning air and the grain and the birds and the people you loved, without the losses and the fears and the accumulated weight of all the ways a mortal life can go wrong. It was home. Made, at last, permanent. Made, at last, safe. We have traveled a long way tonight, you and I. We have stood at the entrance of a tomb in the hour before dawn and felt the cold air breathing out of the stone. We have walked the West Bank in the lamplight, understanding the geography of a civilization built around the fact of death. We have learned the names of the soul's components, felt the particular terror of the second death, the annihilation that the Egyptians feared more than anything the living world could offer. We have followed a priest through his morning rituals in the dark of the inner sanctuary, smelled the Kifi incense and heard the words of the awakening spoken into the silence of the Naos. We have stood in the embalming workshop as the afternoon light turned the cliffs to gold, and understood the 70 days of preparation not as something to flinch from but as an act of love so extended and so detailed that it still produces something close to reverence in those who understand it fully. We have opened the book of coming forth by day and followed the soul through the 12 gates of the night, and we have sat in the hall of two truths and watched the scale in the moment before it settles. We have walked through Deir el-Medina in the evening and heard the children in the narrow streets, and we have stood before the glass cases in the museums of the world and held in our attention the bread loaf and the scarab and the linen bag with its small interior secret, and felt, in those objects, the full and unmistakable weight of human presence persisting through 3,000 years of careful darkness. And now we are here. In the field. In the morning. In the place the Egyptians imagined as the destination of everything, all the preparation, all the prayer, all the love pressed into papyrus and carved into stone and wrapped between layers of linen and spoken at dawn by a priest in a white robe in a lamplit room while the rest of the world was still sleeping. The reeds are moving in the wind. The water is clear, and the fish are silver in the green depths, and somewhere across the field a bird calls once and does not call again, and the silence that follows is not empty but full of everything that brought us to this moment, full of all the names ever carved in stone and all the hearts ever placed on the scale and all the bread loaves ever baked in clay ovens before dawn by hands that have long since stilled but that were, while they moved, capable of this, of turning grain. into sustenance, of turning love into action, of turning the ordinary materials of an ordinary day into something worth placing in the dark alongside a soul you wanted to send safely into whatever came next. The morning holds. The reeds hold. The light holds. You are at the edge of the water, and the water is moving, and the air is exactly the temperature it should be, and you have carried everything you needed to carry and set down everything that could be set down, and the person beside you is someone you know, and the field of reeds stretches out ahead of you into a distance that is not threatening but welcoming, wide and green and lit from within by a sun that takes its time. There is nothing left to do. There is nowhere left to go. The ancient Egyptians, who feared the second death with every fiber of their civilization, who built their pyramids and carved their names and wrapped their dead with such meticulous devotion, who painted their walls with images of this exact morning, this exact field, this exact quality of light, they got one thing, at least, exactly right. They understood that what we want, at the end of all our preparation, at the conclusion of all our long and careful journeys through whatever darkness our particular lives have required us to navigate, is not transcendence. It is rest. The deep rest of having arrived. The rest of the reeds in the morning. The rest of the water moving, the birds crossing, the light falling across the grain in that particular way it falls when you are standing in the right place and everything has, finally, after everything, come to be what it was always meant to be. The field of reeds holds the morning. The morning holds the light. The light holds you. And somewhere, in a sealed room in the limestone cliffs of the West Bank, a name is still carved in stone, enclosed in its cartouche, protected by the oval loop of rope that says, "This name persists, this name is sheltered, this name will not be erased by whatever darkness comes." The name is still there. In the stone. In the quiet. After everything. Still.